company doesn't seem to care about learning from its mistakes.
The worst part about EA's increasingly greedy business model is that the company doesn't seem to learn from its regular stream of mistakes. After the Star Wars Battlefront II loot box debacle, EA should have tried to come up with less predatory ways of making a profit. Instead, the company is simply putting microtransactions back in the game after it failed to meet sales expectations. In fact, EA recently revealed during an earnings call that things are just peachy for the publisher, even though all three of its major 2017 non-sports releases, Mass Effect, Andromeda, Star Wars Battlefront II, and Need for Speed Payback, completely bombed critically and financially. Despite the fact that everyone hates them, EA stock still rose 33% in 2017, which suggests that the company has no reason to learn from its blunders.
EA is seemingly abandoning single-player experiences.
EA is no longer interested in making story-driven single-player experiences. And the company explained why it shut down Visceral's highly anticipated Star Wars game. VP Patrick Soderlund claimed that players aren't interested in games they can finish in a couple of hours. Instead, players allegedly want games that they can return to for years to come. Because of this, EA has been pushing to make more games as services experiences that can be updated with new content drops and expansions. Of course, this also allows the company to make more money by forcing players to buy expansions, loot boxes, and other extras. It seems EA only cares about what players want if they can also profit off those desires.
Visceral's Star Wars game looked amazing, so of course EA killed it.
Before Visceral was shut down for good, it was given one last assignment. The studio was tasked with making a Star Wars action-adventure game. This was a massive undertaking, but Visceral seemed like the right studio to pull it off. Unfortunately, EA never truly committed to the project, and according to Kotaku, the studio wasn't given the time or resources required to carry out such a large-scale endeavor. To make matters worse, the cancellation came alongside EA's move away from linear, story-driven single-player games. Since such games rarely turn a profit, the company is now more interested in putting out titles that can be played for an indefinite amount of time, and that are pumped full of microtransactions. Reportedly, this was not the type of game Visceral was working on, which compelled EA to shut the project and the studio down for good.
The new Star Wars Battlefront lacked features included in the original games.
When EA announced that it was working on a new Battlefront game, fans rejoiced. They'd been waiting for a new installment in the series for years. Pandemic's Battlefront II came out in 2005, and the reboot seemed perfectly timed with Disney's sequel trilogy. However, when EA published its revival in 2015, the new, reimagined Battlefront lacked many of the basic features included in the old games. The most glaring omissions are the new game's lack of a single-player campaign mode and an absence of characters from other Star Wars eras. The game only features battles that take place during the original trilogy, whereas Pandemic's Battlefront II also features settings from prequels. Many fans felt that they'd only received part of a game, and as it turns out, they were right. EA later revealed that it had to cut the game's single-player campaign so that the release could coincide with the debut of The Force Awakens. In other words, EA cut major parts of the experience in order to increase profitability.
Mass Effect 3 forces players to participate in multiplayer to get the best ending.
In order to achieve the best ending in Mass Effect 3, players need to amass a high number of war assets and galactic readiness stacks. While war assets can be acquired by completing single-player objectives, galactic readiness is only made available in the game's multiplayer, which in turn requires unlockable items to realistically participate in. If players don't feel like delegating their precious time to playing multiplayer matches, their other option is to just buy the required resources with real money. If you haven't amassed enough galactic readiness by the end of Mass Effect 3, considering the multiplayer component was a new addition to MF3, the whole thing feels rather cruel.
EA has a habit of buying studios, then ruining them.
The story is as old as time. A big corporation buys out a small, independent company and completely trashes everything that made it special. EA is infamous for buying successful studios and gutting them for profit, or simply taking their ideas and, if they are lucky, a portion of the studio's staff. The following is a list of once popular studios that EA has killed off.
EA killed the Dead Space series and later shuttered Visceral games.
When Visceral Games' Dead Space arrived in 2008, the survival horror title was hailed by the gaming community as an instant classic. EA quickly put Visceral to work on a sequel, which arrived in 2011, and is generally remembered as an improvement on the original. While the game was a critical success, Dead Space 2 didn't meet EA unrealistic financial expectations despite selling 4 million copies. Ignoring the fact that survival horror games have a relatively niche fanbase, EA decided that Visceral needed to refocus its efforts in order to reach a wider audience, and demanded that Dead Space 3 sell at least 5 million copies. Visceral tried to make the third game more of a traditional action title. Fans of the franchise were unhappy with the changes, which caused Dead Space 3 to sell fewer copies than either of its predecessors. In response, EA decided to kill the entire Dead Space franchise and forced Visceral to work on spin-offs of other franchises such as Battlefield Hardline, until the studio was shut down in 2017.
Mass Effect Andromeda was so broken that the franchise is now basically dead.
Mass Effect Andromeda was one of the most anticipated releases of 2017. The game is a current-gen continuation of the beloved RPG series and features a brand new story and cast of characters. Unfortunately, the game was plagued by problems from the very start. Despite numerous delays, EA still managed to release the game with tons of graphical and technical glitches, including game-breaking errors that made it hard for players to immerse themselves in the story's universe. On top of that, the single-player campaign is super cliché and stars a bunch of generic characters who are basically interchangeable. To add insult to injury, EA announced that they had no plans to release DLC for Andromeda after it became clear that the game was a critical and financial failure.
EA sold online passes to players who bought their games used.
In an effort to squeeze a little money out of players who buy their games used, EA once tried to charge players an extra fee to play pre-owned games online. In 2010, EA began to include codes that granted online access with all new games. Codes only worked once, so players were forced to buy unopened games if they wanted to play online. For people who got their games secondhand, the codes were made available for purchase, usually for a bout. This created an issue for players who bought pre-owned EA games. Sure, they could still play the game's single-player and local modes. If they wanted to play online, they needed to drop additional cash. The hidden costs inflated the prices of EA games to the point that many used games cost the same as if they were new. The system left many players upset, up until EA scrapped the idea in 2013.
FIFA games are always glitchy.
Despite the fact that a new FIFA game comes out every year, and that the franchise is one of the most popular game series in the world, EA can't seem to figure out how to fix the abundance of glitches that pop up year after year. Players routinely sink into the field or contort into strange. The glitches are so reliable that every year, plenty of compilation videos pop up to showcase just how broken each new installment of FIFA is.
Mass Effect 3's original ending was so bad that EA had to release a new one.
Mass Effect 3 has an infamously terrible ending. After spending 3 games making a vast array of complex choices, Shepard's fate ultimately boils down to a single decision. None of the choices from the first 2 Mass Effect games have any bearing on how the story ends, and the difference between the good and the bad endings boils down to a change in the color of an explosion. After spending countless hours building up their own unique characters, fans of the franchise were understandably upset. To make matters worse, the end of the game lacked any sort of boss battle, so the final moments were hardly intense. The negative outcry was so deafening that EA later released a free extended cut DLC for the game, which added a more satisfying epilogue to the story. EA basically has a monopoly on football games. EA was voted worst company in America 2 years in a row.
Every EA Sports game is the same.
Every EA Sports game is the same.
Star Wars Battlefront II helped EA achieve the most downvoted comment in Reddit history.
Star Wars Battlefront II helped EA achieve the most downvoted comment in Reddit history.
Hey guys, thank you so much for the support and likes and comments down below, and also thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to see you in the next video. Then take care, bye.